work, and we submitted that at the end of April 24. And I don't have the amount on that, but that one was submitted at the end of April. So, Mr. Chair, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you, Michael. Do we have any questions for Michael Lynn? If not, Michael, we appreciate you, buddy.
Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Next up, Housing Services, Todd Enlow.
Good afternoon, Council. I have a presentation that I would like to give, but before I do that, I do want to point out a couple of things that are about to happen, and I'll talk a little bit more when I give the presentation. But I just met with our procurement team this morning. Individual houses, those with land that they're donating to us so we can build a house on it. We have 63 that are getting ready to go to bid over the next 30 days. So I'm just going to rattle these off. We have 4 more coming up in Adair County, 7 in Cherokee County, 1 in Craig County, 10 in Delaware, 8 in Mays, 7 in Muskogee, 2 in Nowata, 2 in Ottawa, 4 in Rogers, 13 in Sequoia, 2 in Tulsa, 1 in Wagner, and 2 in Washington. So be expecting that. There's a lot that's coming up related to that, and we've got more in the works. But those are going to come out in 4 separate bid announcements over the next 30 days. And so, if I may, I will jump into my presentation. And so this is a report of through into the fiscal year 9/30. So a lot's going to change between into the fiscal year and 9/30 to today. So there's a lot more work that's gone on since then. So this is a verbal, visual report of what's transpired under the Housing Jobs Sustainable Communities Act from the housing perspective. Next slide. So just a reminder, there was $30 million that was passed in October of 2019. $22.5 million went to the Housing Authority, $7.5 million went to CCO. In April of 2022, Chief introduced and the Council reaffirmed the reauthorization of $120 million using ARPA funding. And so that breakdown is $20 million for housing rehab, $10 million for emergency housing rehab, $60 million in new home construction, $4 million in the Speaker Village expansion, $4 million in rental housing, $10 million in domestic violence / crisis shelter, homeless crisis shelter, $7 million in sustainable communities, and $5 million for land acquisitions. So that totals $120 million. What I'm going to discuss today are those that are underlined in that. Those are things that we're working on inside the Housing Authority currently, so or at least through the end of the fiscal year in 2023. So the $20 million in housing rehab, $10 million in emergency rehab, $60 million in new construction, and $4 million in rental housing, and the $5 million in land acquisitions. Next slide. So land acquisitions, the last time I reported to the body, we discussed the acquisition of the property in Tahlequah for the subdivision, which is where the 24 homes are being currently constructed. So in June of 2023, we bought 3 lots in Marble City, just to the east of the community building. Total purchase price on that was $18,157. In Muldrow, on April of 23, we closed on approximately 4 acres, totaling $131,691. In Grove, we've actually closed on this property since, but at the time we had it under review. We're looking between 20 and 30 acres there. The council also passed under the resolution 22-87 in February of 23 for the disposal or sale of 5 tracts of property from the Cherokee Nation to the Housing Authority. So in J, now the Gonohili edition is 8.5 acres. $340,000. In Muskogee, which is now the Warrior Edition, it's 12 acres. Purchase price on it was $510,000. South Coffeyville, that site's under review. That's 10.12 acres. That's $131,000. Holbert is 4.95, or roughly 5 acres, at a purchase price of $85,000. And then Locust Grove which is actually 6 rental units that we opened up earlier this year, 2.34 acres at a value of $105,000. So that's all the money that's been either under review or invested by the end of 2023, and that's $1.85 million of the 5. So $533,000, if you can't read that, for the 23 acres there in Tahlequah. So we've got some more stuff that we're working on. That's just what was done by the end of the fiscal year in September. Next slide. So new construction, applicants with land, roughly half of that $60 million allocation, $30 million. There were 493 applications that we had pending to move forward. And that's a breakdown of which county they reside in. Eder has 78, Cherokee has 100, Craig 23, Delaware 85, 3 in McIntosh. I always joke and say there's only 6 people that live in McIntosh County that are not underwater. 45 in Mays, 33 in Muskogee, 10 in Nowata, 9 in Ottawa, 20 in Rogers, 59 in Sequoia, 11 in Tulsa, 8 in Wagner, and 9 in Washington. So that's the group that we're working from as we're working through this. So that was the pool when we started all of this. There were 493 applicants that were met the timeline on that. Next slide. So this is a comparison 22 to 23 on where people reside on wait list processing, if they're in affordability. So wait list means they haven't moved into affordability. They're still in our wait list. Processing means that we've picked up their application and we're verifying information with them. Affordability means that we are evaluating their ability to make the ability to checking their debt-to-income ratio, that their income's high enough. Land development means it goes to our team where we check ownership of the property, we do surveys, we do abstracting, and then once all of that's completed, then we ask them to sign a deed to transfer it to us. And then ultimately, once that gets completed, then it goes into construction. So in 22, we had 1% in construction. By the end of 23, we had 5% of that total wait list. Next slide. So applicants with land. This is a breakdown by county of either completed or under construction. So the orange on this slide is those that are completed, and then under contract is in the green. So that's a breakdown by each county. There were 77 that were either completed or under contract by the end of the fiscal year in 9/30/23. So far, prior to this announcement of the additional 63, there were 55 more in 2024 that were under contract. So lots of stuff moving even past the September 30th. Okay, next slide. New construction, applicants without land. And so those are individuals that may not have land, but they're really interested in home ownership. We didn't have an opportunity before this housing jobs to actually be able to meet much of this need. And so that's why we started the subdivisions in Tahlequah, Stillwell, Muskogee, Jay, Collinsville, and did I say Sallisaw already? So those subdivisions that are currently under development, that's what those are under development for, to try and meet the need. So in September of '23, we opened up 7 counties where we felt like we had homeownership opportunities available for those without land. And we felt like we weren't going to have enough people that met the criteria of affordability to be able to transition them into homeownership. So we opened up this lease-to-own lottery drawing. In 1 week, in those 7 counties, we had 2,000 applications. And so this is the breakdown. So that's the number of unique applications by county, and then the number that we were able to take out of that list to add to the wait list to be considered for placement in a home when they're completed. And so that gives you a breakdown of the percentage of applicants that were selected from each county to be considered for the wait list. So the average of the 2,000 applications, we were able to take 16% of the people that applied that had a good, valid, unique application. So we added 318 people out of the nearly 2,000 to our wait list for those 7 counties. Okay? Next slide. So this is a breakdown of those subdivisions. So in progress at the end of the fiscal year, Tahlequah had 51 lots with 24 homes. Stillwell, Crittenden Edition, 15 lots, 15 homes. Muskogee, Warrior Edition, 30 lots with 12 homes. Briggs, 3 lots with 3 homes. Collinsville, 16 lots, 6 homes. In design at the end of the fiscal year, we had Jay, had 20 lots with 10 homes. Salisal or Redbird Smith Estates, 33 lots with 12 homes. We looked at Catoosa. We had a piece of property, wound up having site issues there. Sorry, Councilor Deere. And likewise, in Owasso, that land didn't prove out to be viable for construction. In Pryor, we're working on some land acquisition for some adjacent property that we have. And then Muldrow and Grove, I disclosed earlier, for potential land acquisition for future development. So, next slide. So this is Tahlequah, and it looks a lot different. So this was a snapshot from September. This is shows the left side of that photo where the street runs through. That is the northernmost street that you see there in that plat. So we're building the interior portions of that housing addition. So that's where the 24 homes are going. So that means we'll have ability to expand for 27 more homes in that with low costs to actually do that. So all the infrastructure's in place, all the streets, all the curb and gutter, the pads will be built in, everything's on the site. We just have to scratch the pad off and then start construction. Okay, next slide. This is the Crittenden Edition. We visited that site since then, but there's 15 homes and on 15 lots. And one of the things I do want to point out on all this, and we've talked about this previously, all of these subdivisions come with sidewalks. They come with a storm shelter and a master bedroom closet. They also come with a hookup for a generator, an automatic switch for that. And then playground area. So the playground on this one is actually going to be there at the end of the cul-de-sac between those 2 houses. So, so Tahlequah, going back on Tahlequah, just to talk about it, we're probably looking at a June, July timeframe for all of those homes to be ready for move-in. If the weather cooperates with us, I noticed you asked David Moore if the weather's had any impact, and he said no. It's because he's not laying asphalt. I'm really kind of mad at him. So asphalt in Tahlequah has been delayed about 35 days already at this point. We do have the first initial base layer down at Stillwell, but that site's moving along pretty quickly, and we're probably looking at a June, July timeframe as well for Stillwell at the Crittenden Edition. Okay, next slide. Muskogee Warrior Edition. This is 30 lots, 12 homes. We are actually probably going to be done with this in the next 2 weeks, short of Oklahoma Natural Gas. We submitted our application in September of last year. I signed documents, and we still don't have any construction. So we're going to be finished with the entire subdivision, but we won't be ready to move people in until we get Oklahoma Natural Gas in there, so we can get that connected and pressure tested. So we are trying to use every tool that we have to get them out on the site a little bit quicker. So these homes will be finished, those homes will be finished by the end of May. This is Briggs. This is property that we acquired some time back, and we put 3 homes on this site there in Briggs, and this is actually one of our tenants or homeowners that's moving into the house on that day. So we opened that up just earlier this year, just about 60 days ago. Okay, next slide. This is the Collinsville subdivision, known as the Cherokee Edition. There are 16 homes on 16 lots. We are still working with the Rural Water District and the county on a couple of issues. They're in the northeast corner of the property. Having some challenges related to our engineer there, so maybe making a change.
And Tony, these are what the homes look like right here? This is the design?
Yeah, that's the design
That's
for
pretty nice.
Collinsville. Yeah, so that's one that we added for this one, trying to match the existing neighborhood. So that's the same look and feel.
Okay.
If it works out well, then we may add that to our repository of homes to
Good,
offer,
good.
So we're going to test them out on this housing site and see how well it goes across. Okay, next slide. This is J, Ganohili Edition, which means flyer. 20 lots, 10 homes, and all the homes are going to be initially on the east side of the property. And we just started moving dirt last week, so they mobilized on that. So, and then the rest of this week, we've got de-scopes. If you really want to know how well we're doing working with our contractors and the work between us and Commerce and Career Services, last week we had to open 50 bids for the Ganohili Edition for the home construction.
Oh, wow.
I am not kidding. It was about 8 inches deep. And so there's a lot of interest and a lot of folks that are coming to work out there. We were a little bit concerned if maybe Jay was a bit too far removed for some of them, but there was a strong interest in Jay.
So is that the east end?
Correct. Yep. So that project's gotten off and rolling, so expect good things out of there. So same company that is building Stillwell was selected for this one as well. So they're already familiar with the homes and they've done a good job. All right, next slide. So this is Salisaw, Redbird Estates. Counselors in Sequoia County, we had a holdup due to some drainage there in the northwest corner of those lots, and made a couple of discoveries. We put the project on hold. It was actually awarded to a contractor, but we put it on hold until we worked through the details with the city. And last Thursday, I issued the notice to restart work. So they should be mobilizing this week to start on that. And that company that was selected for Salisaw has also done Muskogee, so they're familiar with the plans as well. And so probably by the end of this week, they will move their job trailer over to Salisaw. So you'll start seeing a lot of presence there.
Is this JT Stotts Boulevard?
Correct.
Okay, so, all right.
Yeah, so that little cutout, the little square there in the northwest corner, that is part of People Inc.
Yeah.
They've got a couple of small structures there.
Wow.
So on the front side of that, the entrance right off of JT Stites, that's where we'll have 8 rental duplexes. So 16 total units will go in there as well. So in addition to the actual houses themselves, we have some grant funding that allows us to build some rental duplexes in there. So you'll have 28 rooftops officially.
That's nice.
Okay, next slide. So rental housing. And if you guys will hit one more time on the, like, hit your enter key, it should toggle through some photos there on the right-hand side of the screen. Maybe. So on Tahlequah, we got the Birdtail Edition, 16 rental units there. They were completed around 9:30. We had some additional site work that we completed around it, but I believe we have all but 2 of those units filled up right now. Stillwell, there's 6 elderly units that are nearing completion. The only thing we're waiting on that there is final grading on the site. They just poured all the sidewalks and the street's complete. I drove down it on Saturday after the Strawberry Festival Parade. Locust Grove, we moved those in towards the end of last year, or first of this year, sorry. We finished them end of last year, moved them in first part of this year. Marble City, we have 3 one-bedroom elderly units. So that was part of the land that we acquired there next to the community center. Sallisaw, the rental duplexes I just mentioned. South Coffeyville, we're looking at some mixed housing projects, both rentals and home ownership units. So we're just kind of like Sallisaw, we're looking at opportunities for us to do a mixed use in some of those areas. And then Oshaleta, we're just waiting on the environmental to be returned back from environmental services. I expect within the next 10 to 14 days at the longest, and then we can turn that job loose. Next slide. Oh, see, there comes your photos. So that photo is Locust Grove. These were all shot towards the end of the year, so it kind of shows the status of completion at that point in time. You may have to hit enter again. That's Birdtail, and that was actually shot around June of last year. And then one more, maybe. So that's the interior of Birdtail. And these are the 6 elder rental units in Stillwell. So they look a lot different today, but I've tried to capture photos that represented what they looked like towards the end of last year. Rental housing in Oshaleta. So what we're doing is what we call phase 1, that lollipop cul-de-sac that runs north to south. That will be the initial step. We'll develop the units there on the west side of the road. But we also have future growth for the future. And then to the west, that allowance outside of our plat is where the community building is now. Part of the work is going to be including a lift station for sewage disposal across the site. And we'll be able to tie in the community center as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that is all of the new construction, both landed and landless applicants. And so talking about the $20 million in rehab and replacement homes. Reason I say that is a lot of the work we've been trying to do is making sure that we're making wise investments. And so a lot of times we're making a recommendation for a replacement home rather than just doing rehab. And so we've done a lot of replacement homes with this funding. So, man, it's really hard for me to see that. So under contract, we had in 22 for rehabs, we had 185 under contract. Today, we have at the end of the year, we had 251 under contract. And then we had 97 completed in 22, and in '23, that number rose to 292 that were completed. Replacement homes, we had 54 under contract and 7 completed. In '23, that number rose to 41 completed and 29 under contract. So in a year's time, we got to see a lot of movement and a lot of activity. So, you know, a lot of these homes take several months for them to get completed, and, you know, every site's not always perfect to us. So we have a few challenges here and there. Next slide. So these are just some before and afters. You know, sometimes they're shelters that look like this. Sometimes they're burned out trailers. Next slide. And then the photo on the right is what the replacement home looks like once they're completed. And so that one's actually a trailer house, I believe, had burned out, and that was the replacement home that they moved into. Same thing on this one. Okay, so a lot of good work. Emergency rehab, there was a total of $10 million in this bucket, but $6 million of that went to speaker services. Housing Authority retained $4 million. And so privately owned homes, we had 31 that were under work. And then in '23, that number jumped to 513. So big difference in '22 to '23 in the amount of work that was completed. Managed housing, those units that individuals are in a lease-to-own ownership pattern with us, we had 215 that were completed in '22, and in '23 there were 421. So that's a difference. If you compare the 2 years, that is roughly 250 to 930, roughly. And so that's the difference 12 months can make in the work that we're doing. Next slide. I'm sorry, I think there's, yeah. So this is the breakdown of privately owned homes. So these emergency rehabs, this is where the works occurred. 115 in Adair County, and this is just for those privately owned homes for FY23. 112 homes in Cherokee County, Craig County 17, 45 in Delaware, Mays 30, McIntosh didn't have any, 27 in Muskogee, 7 in Nowata, none in Ottawa, 25 in Rogers, Sequoia had 88, Tulsa has 20, Wagner 12, and Washington 15. So that's a breakdown of the 513 homes that were completed in FY23 for privately owned homes. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so I want to talk to you about this because this is one of the things we've worked really hard on to try and move that needle so we can get more work done. And so you saw that difference between FY22 to FY23 and the amount of work that's been done. Go ahead and hit the enter button, and it's going to just go ahead and toggle through all of these because it's going to. So one is challenge our team to make sure that we stay connected. Inspectors, housing counselors, they're talking to the folks that are submitting applications. We're also staying connected with the contractor. Estimation tools, we found a new way to provide estimates, and so that we can manage that better for budgeting and reporting just like this. We entered into several master agreements so we could expedite our work. So we looked at things on a global scale. So we put out roofing bids, we put out storm shelter bids, those things that we could bundle together and enter into a master agreement. We worked with Taro, and so if you recall, last year we set it up so that anytime we post a job under housing, the contractors get a text message and an email alerting them that that has posted, because if you check CherokeeBids.org, there are solicitations for napkins and tablecloths and everything under the sun. And so we wanted those contractors to just know exactly where that was. So that's worked out really well. Quick pay, we also make sure that our inspectors are getting the closeout documents to us faster so we can turn the pay around. We tell the contractors, if you get the invoice to us and it's signed off on, we'll have you paid by the following Friday. So we want them to make sure that they come back to us. So we try to expedite payment and make sure they keep coming back. We work in mobile, so we've got a lot of iPads and other tools to allow the inspectors to work off-site, so they don't have to come back into the office. Contractor performance, we give them honest feedback on how they're doing on a regular basis. If they're not meeting our expectations, we let them know. And we've actually had a couple of contractors that we said, we're through. You can't work for us anymore. Because we want to make sure that once we turn this over to the homeowners, it's going to be a safe, stable house for them. Next slide. And you'll have to toggle through these as well. So I know the phone system's been a challenge, and we just made some changes to our phone system last week, because in 3 days I got 5 messages from counselors to say, hey, we can't get a hold of anybody. So we made some changes to our phone system last week. So hopefully that will eliminate those issues, because they had voice activated notifications. So if Lisa Hull was previously Lisa Johnson, and I didn't know that she got remarried and now Lisa Hull, and I keep saying Lisa Johnson, and it says, who? Do you mean this person? And so we eliminated that because we had people that had gotten married or divorced and their names changed, and it was throwing everybody off. So we changed our phone system to be able to connect easier with people that may be calling in. We're also looking at additional online tools to help in our inspections and evaluations. The land acquisitions that I looked at, we're looking at making some more in the Tahlequah area as well. I mentioned last month or month before that we're doing an online credit card payment system. We're just waiting on the software company to send us the file layout so we can interface with our credit card processing firm. Loan origination, we're looking at making Section 184 lending out of the Housing Authority offices. And that's big because that will go outside the reservation and outside of Oklahoma potentially. And then we've applied for quite a few grants. We're writing right now for the Price grant, which is due next month. So, one last slide, and then I will hush. So this is how we're doing on that spending. This is through 9/30 of 2024. And you'll see in there what the allocation was, how much we've spent, what our encumbrances are. Those are POs or contracts that are issued to contractors. And so at the end of the year, we had 26 million spent out of the 88 million, and we had 31 million in contracts. And the remaining balances, we have about $30 million left, or almost $31 million left out of that initial allocation. Now, this is through the end of the fiscal year in '23, so a lot's changed since then. But we're watching this very closely. One is making sure we stay in budget, and we live up to the commitment and everything that we have. And with that, I am done. Way more than you ever wanted to know.
Wow.
But that is,
This is the longest community service committee meeting in history.
challenge accepted. I can do
Yeah.
that again.
Todd, I want to be honest, I love them houses that design in Claremore, and it kind of changes the stereotype of a Indian home. Man, they're really, really nice. If we can move towards something like that, that would, I don't know if it's an extreme hike in price or nothing, but man, it's just something different,
Yeah, and that's one of the things that really frustrated me, and it's frustrated me for a long time.
Yeah.
When somebody says, "Oh, that's an Indian house,"
Yeah,
I really want that to become, it's a negative connotation.
it is.
And
It
I
totally
live
is.
in my grandmother's
Yeah.
old house. It was built in '73. It's solid. It's plain Jane. But I take pride in it because she did as well.
Right.
And so one of the things that we're really looking at is trying to figure out ways to pay homage to our ancestry and some of the construction methodologies and techniques that were used prior to removal. And so we're looking at Eric Conrad's cabin, and like the Van House and a couple others, of trying to incorporate some of that look and feel. And I want this to become a Cherokee house
Yeah.
because they're proud of it and it's representative of their tribe. It's not just an Indian house that meets a
right,
HUD
right.
definition.
Yeah.
It's a Cherokee house, and
Yeah.
trying to change that and still be practical about the cost of construction. So we're working on that on every step. So
Yeah. I've caught a little bit of flack because of the proximity of our housing addition in Southall, next to Richland Estates. I have, and everybody hollers they want housing, just don't put it next to us. Well, that's crazy. But anyway, do we have any other questions for Todd? Joe?
Did you hear back from the Solar for All grant? Denied?
So we actually have a de-scope on Thursday to find out why we weren't selected for that. But with that grant, we partnered with Natural Resources and Career Services. So we were looking at it from a holistic standpoint. So we have a debrief with them this Thursday, find out. But they, supposedly there's some retool that's coming for that as well.
Okay.
So we may have some additional opportunities. There's plenty of other opportunities that are still out there for tribal electrification and a couple other things.
Yeah, and if you can stick around afterwards
Sure.
for a minute, thanks.
Kidwell?
Mr. Enlow, thanks for coming in today. Great brief. It's been a long time since I've sat through such an extensive and a meticulous brief like that, but I appreciate all the information. Just a quick question. I noticed on your last slide there where it talked about we had 30 million or so thereabouts left over last fiscal year. We're about 2/3 through this fiscal year with that 30 billion left. Can you give us an idea where we're sitting right now?
It's thin.
I figured that slide wasn't left off accidentally, but are we sitting okay? Where are we at now? We're 2/3 of the way through. I figure that 30 million's running a little low.
So recently I worked with the treasurer and administration, and so we were able to reallocate some other funding. And so we have some direct funding from Department of Treasury, under the Homeowners Assistance Fund, which actually allows us to do some rehabs. That was an injection of about $9 million. And then there was a couple other areas where we were able to reallocate some of those funds. And so that's why those landed applicants, that's why I have 63 that are getting ready to go out for bid, and there's more behind that. So we should be good through the remainder of this fiscal year. So
Good deal.
for what we can conceivably get done and completed in the time frame under ARPA, we should have sufficient funding to be able to address those. But it did get a little thin there for a little bit, made me nervous.
Victoria?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Todd, for a great review. Way back early on in the slides, there was under land acquisitions, South Coffeyville, 10.12 acres, under review. Can you give us an idea what that means? How long do we take to do that?
Yeah, so there is a little bit of a challenge with that site. Cherokee County, we're known for rocks, right? So we have a bumper crop of rocks everywhere we turn around. On that particular site, the soil was such that the undercut was, or what we'd have to remove out and then bring in adequate soil that can compact to sustain the housing and the driveways, was a little bit of a limiting factor. So we hit pause on that one just for a little bit, but we plan to pick that one back up this year. So we'll have architects and engineers looking at that one pretty closely, as well as the Grove, Muldrow, and Pryor sites.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Thank you.
Dr. T?
First of all, great great presentation. Really enjoyed hearing all of these updates. And on the rental properties that were highlighted, there were 3 of those properties that had asterisks, and I was wondering what those asterisks were referencing. It was Tahlequah, Oshaleta, and Stillwell and Marble, I think, with the rental units.
Tahlequah, that represented, there were photos, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
so those photos that appeared on the right-hand side, I was trying to remember what my note was for that. So that represented that the photos that were represented on that slide are of those 3 rental units.
Okay, well, I appreciate that clarification. I figured it probably was something that was fairly simple, but again, appreciate the clarification. And as someone who, I grew up the oldest of 4 in a single-parent home. We were living in a mobile home as a rental unit that had holes in the floors where, tarantulas would crawl in, and the roof leaked, and receiving that mutual help home when I was in the 8th grade was an absolute life-changing event for us and for our family. Paying an affordable rent or, mortgage payment, it completely changed our family's life, and my mom still lives there. So for me, when I say, an Indian home, it is a real point of pride for us, because it completely changed and revolutionized our family's life. So stepping into some of the homes at the Crittenden Edition at Stillwell, the homes that are located here in Tahlequah, not just Birdtail, which is rental units, but also the homes that are built for home ownership out at Briggs and over by, just right off the bypass, and seeing the high level of quality of those homes. If I were in the market for a home, I would love to see something like that on the market. So I think Housing Authority and its contractors and the staff are doing an outstanding job meeting the challenge set forth by not only council, but by the executive. So I appreciate all that's being done. Thank you for the time, Chair.
Danny?
Todd, I just wanted to say thank you to you and your staff. The 6 rental houses in Locust Grove were beautiful. I mean, the contractor you guys hired when we opened them up, they done a great job on them. So thank you very much for that, and it's very much appreciated. When you guys buy a piece of property, you mentioned with Victoria a minute ago, you just can't go in and buy any piece of property because of the cost of getting your foundations and everything else done on it. So I guess you guys do the extensive part of hiring the folks to make sure that we're able to build on these spots, and the septic tanks, everything perks and all this other stuff. Is that?
Yeah, so some of the land that we have, for example, when I apologize to Councilor Deere, Salisaw we've owned for 25 years roughly. It was platted originally in 2002. But I think pushback from the community, they said they didn't want Indian houses in their community. And so at that time, the Housing Authority elected not to develop it. I don't know what the decisions were, but that's how long we've owned that piece of property. Similar to that, and about that same time frame, we purchased some land in Owasso, and we looked at it, and the actual buildability, we would only be able to get 6 homes on about 15 to 20 acres without being in a inundated or flooded area. It's just marshy, swampy area. So that's one of the things we want to make sure is any acquisitions that we make are going to be suitable for construction. And then we do a quick engineering study where they go out and they look at it and say, hey, this is what we think. But just even in Salisaw, we're having to undercut the road by 6 feet to make sure there's stable base there. So you can imagine taking your dozer and digging down 6 feet and then backfilling it with packable material, just to make sure that's, because what we don't want to happen is that the road fall out from underneath it in 3 to 5 years and becomes a maintenance nightmare. So we are trying to evaluate and engineer these things and make sure that we take care of stormwater runoff, as well as anything that we build there is going to be there for a long time. we want everybody to be proud of those neighborhoods. You bet.
Any other questions for Todd?
Can I address Counselor Teehey's comment? If it makes you feel any better, the house that I grew up in, not only did it have tarantulas, but there was a king snake that coiled itself around the cabinets. And I was about 8 years old, and all I could do was scream for my parents. And then we got home one night, and there was a rat that had found its, and I am not kidding, with the tail was this long. And we had to shoot it with a pellet gun.
5 times.
And my dad was convinced it still wasn't big enough. So I know about growing up in some substandard housing. It was not the greatest, so.
Right. Well, Todd, I'll tell you, we appreciate your work, you and Jerry both. I mean, Housing Authority is a huge, huge undertaking, and we appreciate all that you're doing. I know you answer the phone every time I call, whether it's on a plane, train, car, whatever, and you always get right back to me, and I'm thankful for that. I appreciate you.
Well, I appreciate the council's patience. I know that was a long update, but I wanted to make sure that I shared with you what the progress was under housing jobs. And I hope by end of next year, we have even more news to share with the status updates, and we see a lot of happy faces with people moving in.
No.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have Tara Lee. Do we have any questions for Jennifer Kirby for Human Services? If not, old business done pending, new business done pending. Announcements, next meeting is Monday, June 10th at 4 PM, and I need one more motion. All in favor? Any opposed?